Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
Hello, hello.
Long time no see, Jay.
Yeah, it seems just distant recollection, you know. So, we got full crew on duty.
Yeah.
Sky's holding down the fort, as it were.
I see that. Is it possible to do a show on mental health of your pets?
I suppose, you know, there's a lot of science to raising a dog well.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you can end up having a real difficulty. We had a Vizsla that we rescued, and he was 6 months old. So at 6 months, you've passed your critical exposure period for socialization. And very much like other critical developmental periods, it's hard to replace that or recover that. And we worked with professional trainers, and we worked hard trying to get him to be civil with people. Now, I could walk him on a leash, and he would behave going past people and so forth without any trouble. I could go to a store, a little tiny mom and pop bodega, have him sit, drop the leash. He wouldn't move. I would go into the store, got a soda, whatever, and come back out. Now, there may be somebody who came over and pet him. And I would tell them, if you could please step back about 6 to 10 feet, because I'm going to pick up the leash. And his instructions right now are to sit and stay. His instructions when I pick up the leash are to defend me from people that are nearby that we don't know. And they say, "Oh, how can that be?" Because he's been petting him,
Right.
and the dog would just sit there and kind of put up with it, but I'd come up and pick up the leash, and as soon as I picked up the leash, it was to the end of the leash, was a 6 foot round leather leash. He would go out and bark at he wouldn't try and bite, but he would alert to anybody who was nearby. And it wasn't somebody we were meeting and I gave him a tug, so he knew it was okay. So they were all potential problems. So
Well, neurofeedback's operant conditioning, right? And there's classical conditioning. Like what goes on with the pets that if you don't get them in that right age or time period,
well, that's the same with humans. If you miss a certain period for visual exposure or auditory exposure, then the actual you have trouble with them long run. There's a developmental time period that the brain area that's going to be used has to be in active use and being developed. And if you miss that period where the brain is doing that kind of development, you can't go back and backfill very easily. It takes a lot of work to go where it would be just natural if it was present. So vision being one of them, severe visual disturbance early in life, even if you correct all the vision and everything, you still have visual difficulties.
Well, what is the difference between classical and operant then?
Classical conditioning, you're just pairing a stimulus with a response. And
Pavlov's dogs, Drew.
Yeah, exactly. A ding of a bell and salivate. But you can classically condition pupil diameter. You can classically condition blood pressure. You can classically condition electrodermal activities, eccrine sweat gland activity, all sorts of things that are autonomic have been classically conditioned. And back in the late 60s, early 70s, in Yale, they were starting to do operant training to try to demonstrate that the classically conditioned responses could be operantly conditioned. Neal Miller was the professor that was behind all of that, and uh, they got a lot of flack uh, because how can the autonomic or involuntary nervous system be put under operant voluntary control? It makes no sense, doctor. You're a fool, you know. So he took a lot of flack. Now, they would say, oh, well, the blood pressure that you're demonstrating control over is being controlled by minor muscle contractions, and it's not truly an involuntary response. You're mediating it with the voluntary nervous system. So that's how you're tricking us, you know. And how do you, as a professor, prove that the blood pressure control that you've got your students to be able to demonstrate is not being mediated by muscle? Leo DeCara was his student. Leo took curare, paralyzing himself.
That's a poison, isn't it?
It's a paralytic. It can kill you if you don't have somebody bagging you because you won't be able to breathe. It's a paralytic. Not only do you lose, all your striatal muscles, your diaphragm is lost as well. You can't breathe, you can't move, you can't blink. And there was Leo being bagged, volitionally moving his blood pressure up and down on command. So you can't get that through an IRB, you know. So, so, and Neal Miller basically was the founder of FERB, the Foundation for Education, Research, and Biofeedback, that funds students at AAPB. It was back then, it was Biofeedback Research Society, before it became Biofeedback Society of America, before it became AAPB, which the name was changed from Biofeedback Society of America to Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback by Barry Sturman when he was president many years ago, obviously. So
So where do you get it wrong with the dogs? Like, you let them run around, chew the sofa. Like, what is the?
dogs do a lot of training of people that aren't bright enough to know that they're the alpha.
Is that what's going on?
Oh, there's a lot of dogs that train their owners, and there's a certain amount of give and take in the relationship with the dog, where the dog will give you cues that communicating what they need in some fashion as well. So it isn't a bad thing to have being somewhat trained by the dog to understand what their cues are. A certain pitch of a little whine by the back door means he wants to go out. That same kind of a whine without that pitch somewhere else might mean he wants food or something. So he can squeak a little bit to get some attention and let his needs be known, but we don't let him uh, carry on excessively without No. Well, occasionally in play, just goofing around, he can get jumpy and barky, but that's kind of intentional. You bond with your dog by playing with them. So.
So what's going on with these dog whisperer shows where you got a dog that's like 3 years old and then this guy comes in and then all of a sudden, is that just don't believe what you see?
Dogs understand the alpha dog.
There
Front
you go.
door,
Front door.
front door. So that could be a car door closing. It could be a
I think
delivery
it's Dr. Marie
truck.
Swingle showing up.
Could be. The 804 alarm just went. So.
Dr. Marie Swingle, welcome aboard. Long time no see. We're talking about operant and classical conditioning of our pets.
Oh, pets. Okay. I should
and,
with children.
and
Maybe bring it back with children.
and not just operant and conditioning of pets, but in general the difference between classical and operant, and some of the early days with Neal Miller trying to show that you could operantly train things that had been originally found to be classically able to be conditioned, like blood pressure and pupil diameter and all those involuntary nervous system things, and how much trouble he got in for making that claim.
Yeah.
If you claim you can have voluntary control over the involuntary nervous system, it's threatening to some people's understanding of the universe, and
That's not how it's always been done.
Well, look at us now. My gosh, the whole branch of
Well, we make fun of
biofeedback.
Western medicine, but we make fun of ourselves too. You go against a certain protocol, and it's you are really stepping into it. When did operant conditioning become a thing, Jay? Like, how did that start?
Oh, Pavlov.
Mm.
So it started
You know,
there?
oh yeah. Operant conditioning started with Pavlov. Classical conditioning, but he also did operant. And a lot of people will point to Skinner,
Yeah.
but there's,
What's the difference between the two?
Pavlov extended what he was doing into operant, and Pavlov essentially evolved what he was doing, and Skinner took that approach. Now, I don't know whether he had heard anything about it. A lot of ideas pop up at the same time in different locations across the world. A zeitgeist, an idea whose time has come.
Yeah.
You can't you know, say somebody stole the idea from somebody else when they seem to both have taken it out of the universe somewhere and executed it.
Mhm.
Arnaud Delorme, who wrote EEG Lab, MATLAB, came up with taking a component and feeding back a component.
Mhm.
Well, at about the same time in St. Petersburg, Russia, Juri Kropotov, who had from MATLAB, EEG Lab, the software for ICA and everything was SEAM components. He got the Russian Prize for Science for using component analysis to break down the EEG and ERP into its component parts in meaningful parts. And we had basically been using it for taking out artifacts. So, it was but he also came up with component-based feedback at basically the same time. It's not, you know, two
No, the
people see the
discipline.
same shape rock and have the idea, oh, maybe I can use this for a club. So, it wasn't an idea taken from anybody else. It was just an idea whose time had come, and all the materials to put together that kind of an idea was laying around in front of people that were brilliant enough to see, the see the utility of it.
So if you're going through psychology school, like they teach operant there or only classical
Year one.
but operant too?
Well, I mean, they teach, I mean, these are the foundations of psychology, and I think it's really important to have at least basic awareness of it in our field as well, in terms
Yeah.
of, the different protocols that we're doing. They either fall into operant or classic, and there used to be a difference between neurotherapy and neurofeedback, and now, the terms are interchangeable. But I mean, these are our beginnings. And to this day, depending on your protocols and the systems you're using, you're doing either operant or classical conditioning, period. Right? I mean, you're teaching the brain to learn something. It's just a matter of how much you control the process yourself with the interface between the person and the computer, or if you have stimuli, a different form of stimuli, more passively influencing it than actively influencing it. I think it's pretty basic, and hence why they teach it in Psychology 101.
Yeah.
But
And operant conditioning is quite often referred to as instrumental learning. That kind of makes it sound a lot like neurofeedback. Instrument, you use this instrument, instrumental learning, but we utilize all of that, and we stand on the shoulders of the giants that came up with it, and hammered out the kind of the rules of the road. Oh, well, for operant conditioning, you can't delay the reward that much from the response without losing the phenomenal lock.
Yeah.
So we all know for biofeedback or neurofeedback to work, you have to make the ding soon enough after the response. Some response has to happen quickly after your brain does its state for you to pair up with it.
Yeah, you have
The
to
operant
recognize what
conditioning
you're being
basically has
rewarded for.
shown if you delay beyond a half a second or so, you've lost the lock. Your likelihood of reward shaping behavior becomes a long shot if
Shall
you
we
start
say
to extend out.
there's no delayed gratification in
Yeah.
neurotherapy?
So people try for instantaneous feedback. Well, nothing is instantaneous. It takes time for
Social
the
media.
computer to digitally sample and create a feedback. There are some things that are faster than others. IIR filters are faster than FIR filters. Third order filters are faster than sixth order filters. I mean, there's different things you can do to speed things up, and you don't want to use a Fourier, which has a time window for feedback, because that obviously delays things. Jim Hardt patented feeding back any signal faster than 350 milliseconds. Well, that patent's no good. Everybody violates it. Everybody knows that he put out the patent, but he hasn't enforced it. And if you don't enforce your patent, it's no good. And you have to realize that everybody's violating it. So,
And I mean, also in our discipline, I think it's rather cruel to try and patent a process. I mean, we've gone through this numerous times.
it happens often in business.
Yeah.
There's a patent on Theta-Beta ratio, but the person who owns it doesn't intend to charge for royalty if you do Theta-Beta ratio. It was a deal.
Doesn't work anymore, does it?
Theta-Beta training, in fact, is still a reasonable thing to do if you've got too much theta and not enough beta. Theta-Beta ratio training would work nicely for that. But
Careful, though. We have to jump in, though. Since the major advent of autism, people have to be super careful about lifting beta in any, definitely over the central motor cortex and in the frontal lobes. I just want to put that out there because, Jay, what would you say 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that was the norm, and now like nobody does that. I mean, very unscientifically, we say you can pop a kid. I mean, you stay away from beta up now.
Beta up training is only good if there's actually a deficit.
Yeah.
And you can see that by looking at the data. So if you go in informed by having looked before you leaped, you didn't dive into the water until you knew what was under the surface, as my grandmother would warn us not to do.
Yeah.
And
But
she
in
was
these
right.
CAN programs, or even not CAN programs, even, people just look at the ratio. They don't look at where as you said, the deficit is. Very, very important.
Yeah,
Underline that 10 times.
yeah.
Well, Jay, where I was going with on that ratio is for ADHD, it used to be.
Oh, the theta beta ratio was a great predictor back in the day. 1999, a CZ measurement only. It wasn't really QEEG. It was one electrode and the ratio. And Monastro, Linden, and Lubar were the authors of the paper, and they showed a 95 to 98%. It was replicated in 2001. That data went to the FDA. The FDA approved the theta beta ratio as a diagnostic metric for ADD, ADHD, but the ratio's ability to have an effect size, the ability to separate two categories from one another is effect size. And the effect size went from 95 to 98% accurate, separating things, to being so overlapped that you can't tell one from the other at this point. And that's because basically there's 2 hours less per night sleep. And there's a lot of reasons for that, a whole pile of reasons. The color of the light, um, media for kids taking media to bed instead of a book and a flashlight, the best I could do. The D cells wear out real quick. You're lucky if you got a good 20, 30 minutes of reading before the flashlight was gone. After that, you were reliant on Wolf Van Jack from WLS in Chicago, Um,
The
so,
ratio now indicates essentially something is up that's affecting attention.
yeah.
It
But
doesn't tell you the source
the,
anymore.
the, there's also chemical exposure. And
Mm.
you'd think, well, what the hell kind of chemical exposure is going to mess with your sleep? Well, the forever chemicals, the PFASs that last forever, and all of that, they take blood measurements, and the top 20% and the bottom 20% concentration are compared. There's 80 minutes less sleep time for the high concentration of that. So, there, we're we're looking at toxicity as an issue as well, and that's probably not the only chemical that has some influence over that. So
Well, half the things we eat now, I mean, we can go on and on and on about this. I mean, our food sources are polluted, our water sources are polluted, our environmental, all of the fields now that we're bathing in, absolutely bathing in. I mean, it's endless. It's absolutely endless now. Yeah.
if you overlay a map from the CDC, which they may or may not keep around, who knows? But the map that the CDC has of Parkinsonism actually corresponds with toxic exposure areas.
Yeah.
The same thing for Alzheimer's. I saw just today an article about Alzheimer's concentrations by zip code, and there's some places where it's really quite high, and there's some places where it's not. So
MS as well. MS as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
So on the operant side of things, in year one, let's just say you don't know anything about neurofeedback or biofeedback. What do you do as a talk therapist to use operant conditioning when you have a session?
you're going to reward things that are slightly more like what you want than what they're doing in the first place. And that slight bit of reward ends up changing behavior. Students in a class, if they don't look at the teacher, if the teacher moves to the right, and they'll look at the teacher if the teacher moves to the left, pretty soon the teacher is in the left hand corner of the freaking classroom. and he doesn't have any idea, or she has any idea why they're standing there. The reward of the attention of the students, if I'm over here, they're attending, and they didn't attend when I was over there. So, subtle rewards can change behaviors, and
Like
it,
candy?
yeah, well, uh, in working with Down syndrome, little candy pieces are a common. M&M reward systems are not uncommon. Uh, Behavioral changes has to mix classical things that are classically rewarding with the behaviors you're trying to change. So.
Well, there's a carrot and a stick, right? You're talking about the positive side, right? So,
Yes, and the stick can be removed, and that's negative reinforcement, or it can be used as a punishment. That's the use of the stick, which are not the same thing, but they're quite often mistaken as the same thing.
so kindergarten is at what, 5 years old? I don't know, 5, 6 years old, and then you have pre-kindergarten. If you're a teacher in there, I don't know what the qualifications are there, but I would think you would have to be somewhat of a therapist to deal with these rugrats running around. Like,
Well,
what kind of
you're just talking about, I mean, parenting 101, teaching 101 that almost every parent and every teacher doesn't do, which is reward the behavior you want rather than punish the behavior you don't. I mean, and we've just known this forever
Yeah,
that is what works. But
yeah,
there's some kind of glitch in the in the connection between parent and child and teacher and student, that you reprimand the child or you punish the child that's out of line.
isn't it
Um,
isn't it the opposite though? Aren't people more afraid now to use the stick and then we just use the
Not good for
carrot?
Pete. The
you know,
problem is there's
there
no we
there's an inherent network in the brain, the reward center, the nucleus accumbens, your reward, pleasure, unpleasure, and it gives you your positive or negative valence associations and the association cortex with what's going on. The nucleus accumbens, if you randomly were to go in and stimulate cells, 90% of those are positive reward cells. There's only 10% of them that are actually unpleasure. And I won't call them pain because there's a lot of people that find pain pleasurable. So, but unpleasure. And so you should match your reward with the inherent systems wiring to a certain extent, and the brain is really wired up largely for reinforcement, for positive reinforcement. uh, 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 Punishment can be used in a circumstance where the child is doing something that is essentially a life-threatening circumstance, and a quick swat on the butt, not hard or vicious or anything like that, but enough to be a little stinger to classically condition them about the circumstance. But those are rare. You should have discussed the circumstance before the kid was about to step into the streets and needed a little snap in the butt to stop them and get their attention.
Yeah,
So,
I'm going to be a little
uh,
bit critical here in terms of, what we've lost over the ages. I mean, we're talking about, teaching children through fear and control. Many school systems were run by the ruler and the stick, the punishment. And then we realized, okay, hey, this isn't, working. Or this isn't good for the kids, should I say. It did work. That's the horrible thing. And we said, we're not going to hit the kids anymore, but we didn't educate the teachers, even, within family systems, we didn't educate families or whatnot in terms of what to do we talk about the positive rewards. So we essentially jumped from corporal punishment to pharmaceuticals. So first we hit the kids and now we medicate the kids, right? But I would also say, I mean, what Jay was talking about before in terms of what's going on with kids and, the media and the not enough sleep, et cetera, I'd say to many regards, the system has fallen down because parents just don't have the time anymore in this mad rush world to parent in positive reward cycles. So what do? We have our nice little phones and we have our gaming system, so they get reward for highly stimulating attention, which of course is infringing on the ability to, what I say, sustain the mundane, and most school is really mundane. So we're in this vicious circle of what we can't do, what we do that isn't helpful, and how we have these systems to occupy the children so they don't get themselves in trouble because we don't have the time to parent, we don't have the time to educate, that's keeping them in these higher and higher levels of arousal so that when they're not engaged with something, they get themselves in trouble. I mean, it's a swirl. It's a swirl.
Yeah. When it comes down to it, if you look at the number of children that actually have adverse childhood experiences that are significant, it's astounding that any of us end up making it through life. So they've done, the ACEs 10 questions. If you score more than 4 of them as a yes, you have a high probability of later life health consequences, high blood pressure, cardiac failure problems, strokes, etc. So the childhood adverse experiences need to be looked at as well. There are a lot of very unfortunate circumstances that some of the kids are being raised in. The good thing about the ACEs understanding is that it basically takes one very involved, concerned adult to step in and turn around the kid's life and change it from a downward spiral to being something that has a potential future for it, and also change to a certain extent the later life health consequence.
The most beautiful thing, it's been proven over and over again, it only takes one person seen as a guide or a protector or caring, an elder sibling, a neighbor, a grandparent, a mentor, a teacher, and that's the beauty of it. That's the real beauty. Yeah.
So the positives, the carrots, are we in this problem with people being unhealthy because we've used food too much as a carrot?
Definitely. And also the type of food, right?
I'm saying food, energy,
Yeah.
it's like
Oh,
what are
I don't know. Well, since when was food consumed for nutrition? I think it's consumed for gluttony now. Don't get me
The,
going, Pete. Oh,
since
you
they
want to get me going.
there are people that use food as self-soothing of some sort and not a healthy way. And there are people that end up with an obsession that's not a healthy drive towards it as well. And that can end up being not only overeating but also anorexia,
Food
anterior
restriction.
cingulate.
Yeah.
You can lock on, you can lock off. But if it's functioning, you have flexibility and behaviorally, and when it's not working, you get
The
trouble.
scary part about anorexia is, when people pass that tipping point, that food deprivation feels good. And it's really, really hard to bring people back once they've crossed over. But I was going to loop back though, Pete, you started with food, but I mean, any, I would say base biological drive can, be positive or negative. Food is one, sex is the other, right? I mean, they're really positive, healthy balances. And then there's when the drive gets rewired in a negative way. We all know that classic little stereotype of somebody breaking up with somebody and eating a tub of ice cream. Well, I mean, if that happens once every 3 years, it's not a big deal, but if every day you come home from work because something is going wrong and you eat a tub of ice cream, then you're going to have some issues. And then we can talk also about, the way foods are formulated, certain combinations of fat and sugars that we as humans just find irresistible, because not many 100 years ago, the more of those you had, the greater your chance was for survival, right? I can loop back into the sex as well. The more sex you had, the more likely that your genes would continue on this planet. Very healthy, and in modern society, a good sex life is wonderful. But I mean, the purpose of your sex life in modern society has been overridden by pair bonding, pleasure, as opposed to the absolute need to propagate the planet because we're overpopulated, right? So I mean, but we're talking about so many
They've
different.
done a lot of interesting observations in the genetic, uh, the number of circumstances where there's an incestuous relationship in the family is
Mhm.
apparently a lot more common than anybody thought.
Yeah.
And it also turns out that there's a whole bunch of IVF circumstances where the same father was used a whole bunch of times rather than the pair who
Yeah.
figured they were going to be blending their eggs and sperm. The sperm was from the uh, IVF center somehow. So
The
that
ecos. Yeah.
there's you know um, the our familial genetics are interesting, and the phenotype model depends on genetically handed down characteristics.
Mhm.
Look at the parents and grandparents EEGs as well, and you can actually see where the various EEG features kind of were handed down from.
Yeah.
That's an interesting study in and of itself.
I love, love, love working with families. It's amazing. And every once in a while, we even get three generations. And,
Yeah,
with parents and kids, I always joke, well, you're
yeah,
responsible for 50%, that's for sure.
yeah,
But no, it's fascinating. I mean, in the popular literature, they say ADD runs in families, but to a certain extent, it does.
yeah.
But there's this whole environmental component as well, whether the ADHD component turns out to be positive, negative, neutral, and to what degree, you know?
Well, getting back to the conditioning part of things, the stuff we're talking about, sex and all that, hopefully that's dealing with somebody that's over the age of 27. They're fully cooked humans, and we can't really do as much to help them out, even though we try. I'm talking about 5 years old, somewhere around there. You can use the stick or the carrot. What is a good way to teach a kid, for instance, if they're yelling or running around on the floor like in Walmart, do you scold them then and there? Or you let them do it, get out of their system? Like what are you supposed to do? What are you teaching them? What, carrot or stick?
Well, it's a combination. I mean, as Jay was saying before, the best way to teach that event is before it occurs, right? We're going into this public space, and this is the behavior in the public space. Now, we also know that all the best plans laid out, kids have tantrums. That's part of it. But it's critical that the child does not perceive the reward for the tantrum. So if they're having this huge tantrum in the cereal aisle, and everybody's looking at the parent, and the parent is so embarrassed, so they get the cereal that the child had the tantrum over. You don't have to be Einstein to figure out the next time the kid goes in the supermarket, you're going to have another tantrum, right? uh,
So, and I've got an N of one. I have one child, and when he was very young, 6 months old, we taught him how to swim. And the first thing you do is you blow in their face. You do happy things and you blow in their face. And there's an instinct when you blow in their face, they take a big gulp of air.
yeah.
and then you dunk them underwater because they've got a big mouth of air, and then you pop them back up and you sing and you're happy. But you do this blow in the face and they take a big gulp of air. Well, my son was starting to have a little bit of a, a wind up of a tantrumy cry thing, and I blew in his face, and he went, and and he looked at me like I'm trying to have a snit here, you know. What are you doing, blowing in my face? But it stopped him, and a couple of blows, and he forgot what he was trying to cry about in the first place, you know. So, he figured out that I was going to stop him, and I thought, well, you can't walk around in life blowing in your kid's face. It looks a little too odd, you know. So, I would give that's a pairing. I say 1, 2, 3, and then you blow in his face. So, and I would say, do it. Do we need to digitally communicate, or And anyway, he would stop, and he never did have snits. But the unexpected side effect of what you do, you never really know what your effect is on your kid. In preschool, they're going through the numbers. 1, 2, 4. He never did want to hear that number 3.
That's
So,
almost sweet. Yeah.
So when I see
but
Vaughn, I'm going to blow in his face. Is that what
yeah.
Hey, Vaughn,
I
come
would
here.
I would warn you. He has since taken karate classes and did really quite well. I couldn't even reach over and touch him. Yeah, he would block whatever I was. I couldn't just accidentally like tap him on the shoulder. He's awfully quick. Approach at your own risk, you know. So
So you have the carrot and the stick, but is the worst thing that you could do, Dr. Maria, is like to do nothing and ignore? Isn't that the worst thing? Where
Well, I
does
mean,
that fall?
until not too long ago, I mean, the ultimate punishment was ignoring. Okay, the silent treatment. I've talked about this before in connection with, the phone. When the parents are on their phone too much, you're giving the child the silent treatment. So yeah, and that actually can be very, very damaging. But if used
yeah.
in moderation, yeah,
When do you do the silent treatment?
well, I mean, if a
It
child,
depends. I get it, but
well, it always depends. It always depends. But I mean, if a child, as Jay was saying before, is not in any imminent danger, and is doing something negative to get your attention, the best way to have them stop is to not give them their attention, right? But I mean, they're little games that go back and forth. I mean, there's a reason why there are 101,000 or million parenting books with all these styles, because you have to master them. It has to work with the personality of the child, the personality of the parent, etc. So the supermarket, one parent gives the child a little boot on the on the or a little smack on the bottom. Another, in certain cultures, the look from mom or grandma was enough. That's trained in. Other individuals go in and say, well, if you don't tantrum, you can get a candy on
wait,
the way out,
wait,
right?
hold on. Are you saying you can
Open
spank
system.
your kids?
Sorry?
Did you say you can spank your kids?
Well, you can't
A
anymore.
touch on the bottom? Wait, is that a spank? That's not much of a stick.
What I'm
You
saying
want
is
to clarify, Dr. Marie?
no, what I'm saying is there were many, many models, and many in Western society, for very good reason, are gone, right? But I think the other thing is, even in the school system, the supermarket or whatnot, very frequently, when you hit children, it was a system of control based upon fear. And it actually didn't help with learning, because if a child is in fear, excuse me, it can compromise the learning. They'll sit very still, they'll pay attention, but they won't actually be learning. Okay, so I mean, apart from humor, there are many reasons. You're hurting the child in different ways when you hit them. It wasn't just the pain component. You could actually thwart learning with corporal punishment.
Well, let's go to school administration. If a kid's acting up in school, isn't it a reward to suspend them and send them home?
You
And
bet. And I go over that with parents over and over again, and also with the school system. You act out in class, your reward is to go to the principal's office where the really nice secretary gives you coloring books and all this. That is a positive reinforcement of negative behaviors. Same thing, you get to go home and play video games or watch TV. So one of the things I highly counsel parents to do is you make staying at home a horrible, horrible experience.
what
That
advice do you
you
give
have
the
to take
parents to
out the
do?
garbage, clean up the puppy poop, scrub the toilets, do
Nice.
all that type of stuff so that school becomes the good option, right?
So going home and playing video games, that's not the right punishment when they act up in school. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Marie?
Yeah, you don't say, but I mean, the systems are broken. The systems are really, really broken.
Well,
Yeah.
well, let's fix them. Magic wand, Dr. Marie's magic wand, Harry Potter, Zoom. You
Well, I
fixed it.
mean,
What did you
number one
fix?
is make the classroom smaller, right?
What's the right size? 8-1?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, generally speaking, 15 and under is really, really good. Really, really good, right?
So 15 to
Um,
1. The reason I'm questioning that is, when you have subordinates at work, people you work with that you're responsible for, they say you can't manage more than 8 to 10 people. Is that different with kids? You can manage more kids than you can do adult human beings?
uh, I, you're gonna hate the answer. Again, it depends.
Depends.
But I mean, there's a huge cutoff that over 15 things changes. Sure, 10 to 1, 8 to 1. If you look at functional circles with children where everybody gets a little time to speak, you're talking about 5 to 6 to 1. It all depends on what's being done. But the ability to give group individual attention within a group that doesn't compromise the group, I think is fantastic. I think one of the things that's not working in the educational system is the amount of aides. I think if you had more teachers instead of more aides, so for example, you have 4 aides in a class of 35, why not have 5 teachers and uh, break down the groups? I think that would be much, much more beneficial. Now, of course, there are exceptions, right? I
So
mean,
should you ask
sometimes,
more out of the student then if they're
I,
getting more?
sorry?
I think you'd have trouble finding that many teachers given the pay
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Oh, you'll
level of
find them.
respect.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, the credentialed teachers are not easy to find. They're allowing people to teach with uh, permission to teach without the credentials.
It's
And
sad. Hey, Jay, why don't we, that person that got paid $1 billion to sit at a desk and say yes, no for healthcare? Why don't we take some of that money?
Who's this,
yeah,
Dr. Marie?
Oh, from Jay was saying on yesterday's chat. Do you want to repeat there, Jay?
Yeah, Jay. We'll point everybody to yesterday's chat.
there was the head of hospital system that was paid in 1 year $1 billion, and I found it hard to imagine how you earn that. I mean, work. You sweat, you toil, you lift, you kick, you push. You work, and I don't mind being paid really well for good hard work. Should get paid real well. Uh, but after the first $100 million in a year, I mean, how did you earn it? I mean, what kind of sweat do you do to get $1 billion?
What's the
I
math
just
there?
don't
How much are you
understand
being
that.
paid a minute?
But and what do you use it for? For God's sakes,
Yeah,
um, if I had that money, I wouldn't have it.
yeah.
I'd have given it away. That's what I do with my money now. you know, uh,
Well,
so you
Jay,
know,
it all
What?
comes down to the upbringings too, because if you didn't have any, if you had scarcity growing up, you'd have a different appreciation than you would today, right? I mean, that's part
Yeah.
of the life experience, right?
yeah, I didn't have scarcity, so
Right. So everybody's got their different upbringing. So now,
No need
uh,
to hoard money.
but
Yeah, yeah.
where I'm going with it is you got the carrot to sticks. We're talking about classical and operant, and then we're talking about the school systems. And now supposedly something's going to be done with the federal school system. Who knows? Good luck. I'll have my popcorn and watch in the sidelines. But
Yeah.
is if you had the magic wand, Dr. Marie, what would you do to go? Because you're saying have it you're saying there's a class of 35, so one teacher and you have four aides, so you have five people, so the reporting would be like five or six kids to one
Well, I
adult.
think, yeah, if you have functional groups of smaller, smaller groups led by a qualified teacher, I think, yeah, magic wand, I would say money going into teacher education, but not the type of teacher education that's going on now.
Right,
Um,
right. We're still dealing with your magic wand. It can't
yeah.
do it. It can't deal with the
Well,
past, but
yeah.
going
So really educate people in developmental stages, types of learning. For example, I keep on going on about phonetical reading systems. They only work with a certain percentage of children. Teach variety. Get good people and then pay them well. Right? You get good space, good people, pay them well, because we all know if you invest in individuals, they don't fall as frequently. I mean, it's
it,
very, very simple.
so so,
Should be. We
so
spend tons of money cleaning people off the
exactly.
pavement once
I'm a
they fall in.
taxpayer and I'm paying for those extra aides and all that, which is great.
Yeah.
Is it is it fair for me to say, hey, I like to see the scores go up?
Well, what did the scores measure?
You know,
Aptitude, I believe.
we had a little school system, and uh, it was the most racially diverse school system in the Bay Area, which is a fairly racially diverse area. And it's a little tiny school system, John Swett Unified School District, and they had a lot of people who were not going to be university oriented. They weren't interested in taking math classes, et cetera, et cetera. And we put together what's called a career academy for people who wanted to learn carpentry, welding, electrical wiring, CAD CAM, uh, um, and uh, the teacher had a doctorate.
Yeah.
So he was really quite good, and the the kids who wanted to learn CAD CAM ended up having to understand some math, so it kind of put them back into interest in some of the academics as well. But the kids that came out of the career academy had immediate step directly into an apprenticeship program and were advanced rapidly into journeyman positions within the trades. If you're young and you've got a skill set of a tradesman, uh, male or female, you have the ability at some point to piece together your own business.
Yeah.
You can be a community leader with a large, very successful business with experience from the trades. So
If
it's
I could jump in here, my major issue with the scores is they reinforce regurgitation, not necessarily understanding. And a lot of the scores then are used for political purposes. As Jay was saying, you know, uh, academia is great if you want to go on for certain levels at university and then become professors, etc. But practical knowledge, I mean, one of my major issues with math is, you learn all of these equations, but there's nothing practical about it. I jump up and down and scream, the most important thing you need to teach children is percentage. It's one of the dividers between individuals who learn to manage money well or not, to realize how many times you're paying for something if you put it on a credit card with 20%, how much you need, to save up so you can buy a car for this price versus don't save up and pay 3 times the price for the car. I mean, it really is a gatekeeper of poverty and middle class, is not understanding percentage, like basic things. I could go on and on and on about this. The
Yeah, the
other
law of
one,
small numbers and
yeah,
percentages that gets you lost too. We're
yeah,
talking about carrots and sticks. We're
yeah.
talking about classical learning, operant conditioning. What
I was
about
going to
the
give one more though, Pete. In
go?
terms of carrots, okay.
Yeah.
Many, in particular in Europe, is feed the kids at school. And it is not a program for the poor. You get hot lunches in every single public school. You don't bring your lunch. It's not a burden. There's no comparison between what children eat or don't eat. Many of them are not corporate sponsored, meaning you don't get ketchup as a vegetable. And it takes away a lot of burden of the parenting, etc.
Not a lot of skinny kids out there though.
Yeah, but a lot of kids are overfed and undernourished, right?
Well, we're talking about sticks and carrots, and we're talking about the kids. What about the older kids over the age of 27? What are the sticks and carrots for the teachers? Like, how what is their reward for doing a good job, right?
Opinions.
I no, I know. I mean, I'm just saying we
We're
got it.
supposed
We
to be
got an issue
talking
with the.
about, and what generation? I mean,
As
we've all had a
yeah,
heyday with the millennials in terms of what they've been taught and what they expect at 27.
We
Um,
you brought it up earlier. You're talking about teaching to the test, and you're saying,
yeah,
well, we can't. There has to be something objective to have
yeah.
differentiation and know what a good teacher is from a not good teacher, right? So what is it? That
I
is
would, I would say if the children have functional learning, not just the regurgitation,
yeah.
right?
what is functional learning?
That you can actually apply it. I mean, the
Like, how
example
do you
I gave
prove
in
that you
terms of
have this learning?
percentages.
Is what I'm asking.
Sorry?
How,
Portfolio, a
No.
portfolio.
what is that, Jay?
This you've done things in school. Show them to me.
Yeah.
What have you done in school? Examples of your writing, your science fair projects, the uh, your what did you do in athletics? I mean, you have a portfolio that represents what you've done and who you are, and that's more valuable than an SAT score,
Yeah.
Well, how
which
do
you
you know
may
what
have
a
somebody take for you.
Yeah.
And
well?
so, you know,
Hold on now. It's not North Dakota. Then how do you get the valedictorian?
hey, they're usually picked based on popularity, although they have to be academically intact as well, you know.
Yeah. Well,
I,
one of the things that I kind of notice, and I do this a lot in my work in the neurotherapy practice, is assess whether somebody is a performance reader versus whether they're a content reader. And I think those are basic things that teachers should know about. Now, I don't want to be really careful of not blanketly criticizing teachers. But again, if you have a classroom of 30 and you ask little Allie to read, and they go on and the reading is perfect, and the teacher goes, great, A plus, but they've just figured out the phonetical system. They have no idea of what what they're actually reading, right? It's a performance, it's a recital that there's nothing to do with content. And that happens all the time when you have too many children in the class, as opposed to you read this line and then you ask a few questions on it. I mean, another one is where children learn explicitly to find where the answer is in the text. So they figure out this is an action answer. This is a noun answer. Okay. That's freaking brilliant. The fact that the child can figure out where the answer is without understanding. Okay. So, work with these little minds and figure out, what the problems are in our system and in our teaching.
What's the best carrot? Money?
Title for many, actually. Approval, care.
Is that the gold star? Like kids are all looking for it and they're like, well,
There was a reason for gold stars, token systems. I would say tokens and affection. The problem now, though, the problem with today's kids is the tokens don't work past a certain age. They just have, I hate to say it, but they have too much. And they really don't care if you take something away because they have 5 others. Yeah, it's been an issue, I would say, at least 15 years, where the parent says, I'll take this away, and they'll go, I don't care.
But isn't it like kids, adults, everybody's always testing everybody just to see what the limits are. Here's what you said the boundaries are, but where did you take action on?
Yeah.
Right?
There's also, instead of tests, there's contests, which are a bit different than a test. NASA puts out a contest for designing a space station.
Yeah.
My son won that nationwide.
He did?
Yeah.
Fun.
He was in eighth grade. Open for anybody high school and younger, and 8th grader won it.
As long as the parents don't do it for them.
Well, that's true. The science fair in the Bay Area was interesting. The judges go through and they have to figure out whether you actually built the volcano yourself, or whether this was something somebody else did for you. And as they're going past my son's science fair project, they look at it and there's these brain maps and wiggly line EEGs and, happy, sad, math, and resting. And they look at it and they said, well, this is all very interesting, but where's your control group? And he looks at them and says, well, haven't you ever heard of it within subject experimental design? They hadn't. They called to Berkeley and talked to the statistics people and found out, yes, it's an emerging area of statistics, So he won the science fair, but they wanted him to go to the state science fair from the Bay Area Science Fair. And he said no, he had a cruise. He was a Sea Scout, and they had a big old Chris craft. And so he had a cruise. So he just has no, send somebody else, So.
Dr. Marie, I'd like you to come up with the thumbnail text for this show. Carrot sticks.
All around the world in the classic. Well, I mean, it's true. I mean, we do criticize the teachers, but as Jay said, we don't pay teachers enough. We don't.
How much should we pay them?
System enough. I don't know. I think the 2 classes of people who should be paid a whole lot are politicians and teachers. Okay, because then you get good. You get good competition right now. It's the same in Canada. Is many individuals are going in for all the wrong reasons. They're going in for ego and celebrity, and you can make a lot more money in engineering or business or finance or what have you. But those are the type of minds we really need in politics. So it's a contest.
Okay.
Put it.
I'll ask you this question. Teachers, they should be paid on the same level as.
Oh, wow. I'd say nurses. Yeah. I would say.
But nurses aren't paid enough.
Oh, depends on where. Yeah.
My goodness.
I'm saying nurses
There's
and doctors.
Lots of different kinds of nurses.
Nurses, doctors, caring professions. Yeah. But the educational, not with the education they have now. I think, you need to change how we educate teachers to merit that salary as well. So it has to come from both ends.
Careful on merit, because there's nothing objective to tie it to. That's my point. All right, before I get myself in more trouble, Jay Gunkelman, Dr. Marie Swingle, Carrot and Stick Podcast. That could be another one we get
Carrot stick.
going.
The carrot stick podcast.
Y'all have a great weekend. I'm going to quickly click end. Goodbye.
Bye.
The Neuronoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.